Welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Sermon with Hyde Park United Methodist Church in Tampa, Florida. I'm Matt Hotho, the Director of Production and Online Engagement.
And I'm Magrey and Matt, the Senior Pastor.
All right, Magrey, you just preached a sermon on Christ the King Sunday, which, as you mentioned, is the end of the Christian year. So even though we typically do our years in review, around the middle December, end of December, let's do one right now to kick off Beyond the Sermon. So what's one thing this year that was like a big moment for you, maybe a pivotal moment or...
Like a Spotify sermon wrapped list.
Yes,
or
a
something.
Spotify sermon wrapped list.
Wow. Okay. Well, are you asking me personally or in terms of the ministry here at the church? Or
I think with Beyond the Sermon, I like thinking more personally.
Oh, yeah. Personally. Okay. So I continued to be faithful to my daily practices. It was something that I started in earnest last year, particularly last November. And it really, what I discovered was my daily rhythms have been a source of resilience. So that includes everything that I do from 5:30 to 7:30 every morning. It's been really, really helpful.
That is centered around Give Us This Day.
That's right. GiveUsThisDay.org, which is a spiritual resource, but also involves my journaling, my prayer time, and my running. I'm on track. I could say this now and it's recorded in the archives. And then if I don't get it, then all of you will say, how about for that? But I'm on track that by the end of 2025, I will have run 1,200 miles in 12 months, which was my goal going into this year.
That's 1,200 miles in 12 months.
About an average of 100 miles a month.
That's amazing. Yeah. That's amazing. Yeah. So one thing I did this year that I'm really proud of is I'd always wanted to start a podcast that highlighted the stories of adaptive athletes. Because I get to meet a ton of adaptive athletes through the CrossFit community and then beyond.
Yeah.
And I did 47 episodes this year.
Wow.
I know. Sometimes I look at the numbers, I go, wow, that is insane.
Okay.
And we're going to come back strong next year, telling more stories.
So since this is a podcast format, folks will be familiar with how to access your podcast. So let's go ahead and hear the name of it and how people can access it.
It's called the Adaptive Athlete Podcast, and it is only podcast. You will find it on YouTube, but it'll be audio only.
Okay.
And you'll hear stories from adaptive athletes all over the world who were either born with disabilities or acquired their disabilities later in life, but do fitness or other sporting endeavors. And we just talk about what it's like to overcome that. In fact, one thing that I think connects with what you were saying just now about your 1,200 miles in 12 months is one of my friends, her goal was to do an Ironman this year. And 4.5 years ago, she couldn't run 5K. Wow. She couldn't run a 5K. Wow. She tried it. Her bike gave out about halfway through the bike on the Ironman. So she didn't complete it. But her mantra to herself is, I am my work ethic. It's not about the results. It's about being consistent with my work ethic. Right. And I just think that's so true. Like no matter what happens this year, as you were saying, if hitting that 1,200 or not, the work ethic is what's gotten you to this point, right? For me in my journey, it's what's gotten me to this point.
That is certainly a bridge to the heart of the sermon from this past Sunday, from Christ the King Sunday, which is we tend to dwell and fixate on the past. We tend to dwell and fixate on stuff we can't control in the future. But to say, I am my work ethic, centers you on what you can control, which is the here and the now.
Yeah. So let's talk about that a little bit more. There was, towards the end of the sermon, this quote that you referenced from Pasadena Community Church, where you grew up, about having our mind on the past, our hands on the present, and our eyes on the future.
Correct.
Tell me a little bit more about that threefold way of thinking about how we live our lives.
Well, it's inescapable. We tend to think about time linearly, like it's a straight through line that goes from our past to our present and the future. And because of that, we tend to see all three of these things as equals. And it's true. We can't escape the past, and the future is inevitable. So we can't simply be so focused on the present that we dissolve ourselves from the realities of both what has happened and what might happen. So it's important to categorize, compartmentalize what we can have a good relationship with in terms of the past and the future. Yeah. And that is minds on the past. I mean, God has given us these brains, these memories for a reason. And certainly so much of the Judeo-Christian rhythm is built on remember. It's one of the most common commands in the Bible is to remember both the highs and the lows of the past, but not to fixate on those things. Also, to have an eye on the future means to say that things are always in flux. There is no such thing as permanence. Nothing is static. I once had a therapist who reminded me that our life stage, our lot in life changes every 5 years. So whatever is happening now and whatever has happened will be different in the future. But we can't fixate on the future either because we can't control those things. So to say you have your hands on the present is just like what your friend said. We are our work ethic. We can focus on what we can do here and now. That's built on both the past and the future, but is centered on what we can do right now.
I just realized that 5 years ago, we were under a tent in
See?
there filming Blue Christmas.
Right.
You had a gimbal.
Right.
Just crazy.
Right.
Crazy. And now where we are now.
And 10 years ago,
Yeah.
so 5 years prior to that, I was introducing myself to you all as the new senior pastor. 15 years ago,
I was getting
in
ready to get
Iowa.
married 10 years ago.
Right. See, 20 years ago, my kids had barely been born. So you could track that.
Wow.
Now, if you think about what life will be like 5 years from now, things could be very, very different. We could be gone, and you'll just be looking at 2 AI figures posing as Magrey and Matt.
Well, I mean, I think that's actually a really nice centering, because it does ground you in the present, in the sense that you are the person in the present having these thoughts, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes anxiety comes from we can't control our thoughts.
Right.
The past comes at us and we didn't have control when that valve got turned on, and all of a sudden we're anxious because something happened in the past.
Right.
Or we're thinking about the future and that valve turned on, and we didn't have control when that valve turned on.
And you're getting hit by both sides.
Right. And in this moment, what you're saying is like, no, I'm going to consciously decide to do an exercise where I allow myself to go back in 5-year rhythms, and kind of think about that.
That's right.
I wonder, as we think about Thanksgiving, when we're all thinking about what the heck are we going to talk about around this table sometimes, or maybe the holiday season when we're forced into some of these interactions with people, I wonder if that wouldn't be a good tool as something to just kind of pull gratitude out of the table, right?
I
This
love
gratitude
that idea.
for where I was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and now we're here in this present moment with these present people.
That would be an interesting exercise, a thought experiment for everyone around the table to do. Would be, what is something you are grateful for that happened to you long ago? What is something that you are gratefully anticipating that you're looking forward to in 2026? And what are you savoring right now? Like, what are you grateful for in this present moment? Oftentimes when we go around the table, we just say, what's one thing you're grateful for? And it's often a very genuine answer, but it's just one-dimensional because we're just talking about something perhaps esoteric that we're grateful for. But something grateful from your past, grateful for the future, and something you're grateful for now could be a really cool, multi-dimensional way of asking that question.
Yeah. I think that's actually a great place to kind of wrap up as we wrap up Beyond the Sermon. What we're going to do is we're going to do our traditional ending, and then we're going to actually hang around for 5 minutes and have a quick theological conversation. So if you want a little bit more content, we're going to give that to you. But if you're, hey, it's Monday, I'm ready to get back to work, we got you on that too. So as we're going to wrap up this episode of Beyond the Sermon, we want to tell you about one really important thing. As the year wraps up, we want to invite you to partner with us through generosity, through submitting an estimate of giving. You can do that on our website by going to hydeparkumc.org/EOG. And you just let us know what you plan on giving monthly for the next year.
If this has been a beneficial part of ministering to you, not just Beyond the Sermon and the online services, but everything that Matt and the amazing team do to engage digitally, if any of this has been meaningful for you over this past year, you can help us continue to spread this wonderful ministry of making God's love real through your estimate of giving of any size. Literally any amount helps our finance committee plan for the bright future that God has in store for us in 2026. So thank you for filling out an EOG for us.
And thanks so much for joining us for this episode of Beyond the Sermon. We'll be back next week. Bye. All right, so this theological conversation, if anybody wants to stick around for it, this little bonus after the sermon, after Beyond the Sermon?
Beyond the Sermon.
Beyonder
the Sermon.
Real quick, there was this idea that came up in the sermon that Jesus is Lord.
Right.
And I hinted to it in our intro for online, which is that is a fundamental question that's asked of all clergy who want to become ordained elders and deacons in the United Methodist Church.
Right.
You served on that board for a long time.
Right.
What is the answer to that question, but what are the things around that question that we should consider when we're thinking about that question?
Well, first of all, you're right. It is a question that every person who aspires to become a minister needs to be able to answer clearly and succinctly, because John Wesley required every potential United Methodist or Methodist minister to be able to answer that question. So it's an ancient question for us. What does it mean to call Jesus Lord? There are many ways to answer it. And the best way is comprehensively. Oftentimes when you talk about Jesus is Lord, you answer it autobiographically, like Jesus is my Lord and Savior. And that's certainly a dimension of it, to answer it personally. What does it mean for you to call Jesus your Lord? And you can talk about your own personal narrative, your own faith journey, and that's an appropriate way to do it. But oftentimes people stop there to say that lordship is entirely individual and personal. What I love about the Colossians text, and I didn't go into it in the sermon, but you can see it in Colossians chapter 1, is that the lordship of Jesus is much broader in scope than just individual lives. Jesus Christ is Lord of the church. He's called the head of the church, which means everything we do as a congregation and as a wider connection of Christians around the world is under the lordship of Jesus. All of it is based on all of us being the body of Christ together. Jesus Christ is also Lord over all creation. That's clearly in the case of Colossians 1. But the reason we need to be good stewards of all created things is because all created things were created by Jesus, and we are therefore responsible to him by taking care of all creation. So Jesus Christ is Lord of us individually, as a church, I would add as a nation, for sure, and also as Lord of all creation, Lord of the universe.
So that brings up two questions I'm going to ask back to back.
Yeah.
So you said Jesus is Lord of the nation. Reconcile that with Christian nationalism.
Right.
And then the second thing is Jesus Christ is Lord of all. Reconcile that with ecumenicism.
Sure. Yes. Good questions. So my favorite definition of Christian nationalism came from Tim Alberta, who wrote a powerful book called The Kingdom, the Power, and the Glory. I heard him do a lecture at Candler about a month ago where he said, Christian nationalism is a fusion between bad theology and bad history. And oftentimes that means a theology that is egocentric, that is all about serving our own sense of power and control, over and against a bad sense of history where we forget that that kind of warped power has caused harm, particularly to minoritized and oppressed people. So to call Jesus Lord in the face of Christian nationalism is to say that it's not about us. It is not about our own sense of power or ego. In fact, it is about the people who are the most powerless, the most minoritized, the most forgotten throughout history. And in fact, the witness of the gospel shows us time and again that Jesus was much more interested in the people who were ignored than the people who had the power. Christian nationalism tends to fuse religious conviction with political partisan power as a way of garnering power for those who are the powerful rather than the powerless.
Gotcha.
In terms of ecumenicism, I mentioned Pope Pius XI, who instituted the solemnity of the feast day of Christ the King in December 11th, 1925. And there's actually a section in there where he says that this is not just a Roman Catholic thing. He says the ideals of Christianity are universal. So for all people who aspire to live with peace and tranquility for the common good and human dignity, that is actually ascribing to Jesus Christ as King. Now, you may have a different kind of faith tradition that might use different language, but the ideals of Jesus Christ as King are universal in terms of the human experience and human history. And so it is broader than just one faith tradition saying, you got to go through us.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Magrey.
Yeah.
That's a good wrap up. Thanks so much for joining us again for this extended Beyond the Sermon. We'll see you next time.